Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Kalen DeBoer, this Alabama program looking to get active in the transfer portal. And, to an extent, they're in a tricky spot because they got a lot of really good football players on this roster that are, making their decision whether to come back or go to the NFL draft. I would guess that Kalen DeBoer and the staff have had conversations with those players and are kind of adjusting how they want to address the transfer portal accordingly. One of the things that fires me up about the next couple of weeks for Alabama, Kalen DeBoer is a proven evaluator in the transfer portal. Like, go back to his time at Washington, there weren't many programs that use the portal better than Kalen DeBoer. There are some programs out there that just want to go get as many players as possible. You're going to see Alabama get active, but I think they're going to be very intentful in terms of what players they want to bring in the evaluation process that kind of goes along with it. We're starting to see some early names emerge. Want to get into some of those names. I also want to give just a few of my takes for some other guys that I think Alabama should be looking at as well. Before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, to the Alabama fans. There's no doubt it's going to be a busy next couple of weeks. All the support y'all continue to show to the fellas means the absolute world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into what I think is the biggest target that Alabama is going after so far. KC Concepcion, NC State wide receiver. We've talked a lot about this kid. There's going to be people that look at the 2024 year and say he might not be worth bringing in. To go back to that freshman year, in KC Concepcion, he was the NC State offense. He led them in targets, well over 100 targets, led them in receiving yards. He even led that program in 2023 as a true freshman in rushing yards as well. This is a do-it-all playmaker that no doubt wants to play in this Kalen DeBoer offense. When you have all the assets at your hands like KC Concepcion, Kalen DeBoer, he's going to get you involved in a lot of different ways. He's a polished route runner, but what he does with the football in his hands is truly special. And so I think he'd be a very good fit in this Alabama offense. And you start looking at Ryan Williams and KC Concepcion in 2025, that might be the best wide receiver duo that we see in the country. I think this one would make a lot of sense. Going to the offensive line, and to me personally, one of the most misunderstood offensive linemen in the portal is Patrick Kutas from Arkansas. You look at some of the PFF numbers, especially in 2023, they weren't good. They weren't good because he was playing offensive tackle, and he's not an offensive tackle. He is clearly an interior offensive lineman at guard. He had to play tackle because Arkansas was really struggling with some injuries on the offensive line. I don't even think Patrick Kutas was healthy playing out of position in 2023. Now he deals with a back injury to start 2024. When he got healthy and was playing at the position he should be playing, which is on the inside of that offensive line, he emerged as a proven commodity as an offensive lineman in the SEC. One of those things we always talk about with SEC programs, it's hard to grab offensive linemen because if you're grabbing an offensive lineman from another conference, specifically maybe some G5 conferences, it's hard to make that evaluation in terms of, hey, can you go from the G5 to SEC football? It is a completely different sport. What you love about Pat Kutas is he's a proven commodity in the SEC. And again, you go back to the 2024 film when he was healthy on the inside of the offensive line. This is a damn good plug-and-play offensive lineman. He ain't that good of a tackle. Probably could play tackle for you in a pinch. But I think a healthy Pat Kutas playing at his position on the inside of the offensive line, very, very good addition. He should be on campus for Alabama today. Next one I want to talk about, another Arkansas Razorback, Luke Haza, another one of my favorite tight ends that you'll see in the portal, probably my favorite tight end in the portal. Background in him was well on his way to being a true freshman All-American in 2023 and then goes down with a season-ending injury. Fast forward to 2024, just doesn't get as involved in that Arkansas offense as you would like. I think a large part of it had to do with Taylor Green just going to Andrew Armstrong. And look, I don't blame Taylor Green for going to one of the best wide receivers in the SEC and Andrew Armstrong. But, I mean, Luke Haas was an absolute weapon at tight end that just needed to get more involved. And you look at Alabama, obviously replacing some tight ends that were productive. Luke Haas, to me, he would have been the best Alabama tight end on that roster in 2024. He's a guy that you can line up in line. and he's a spirited blocker, which is something that's important. Then you split him out wide. You have him as a pass catcher, can do it all. And he's not somebody that kind of walks into the room and says, holy smokes, that's a matchup nightmare, like a guy like Rob Gronkowski. He knows that tight end position. And that tight end position, it's a really nuanced spot. You got to have some good feel. Luke Haas has really good feel. And he's a guy that if you can get him more involved in the offense, I think can be a weapon. And what I love most about Luke Haas, which is kind of a growing concern at the tight end position in college, is there aren't a lot of true inline tight ends that can be threats as pass catchers. You know, there you have those guys that, and kind of like what Alabama might have done with Caleb Bowden, that big body pass catcher that should be a tight end but can't really inline block, so you got to play him at wide receiver. And then you have some guys that are really good run blockers but don't really give you a ton of juice as a pass catcher. There ain't that many of those tight ends that can do it all. I think Luke Haas can. And I think if you get him in a spot where he's incorporated in the offense, I think he can be one of the best tight ends in the country. He's the 20th best prospect according to 24/7 Sports in the portal. I'd even argue that maybe he's a little undervalued. I think this guy's an absolute dude. Another really intriguing name that Alabama's kicking the tires on is Kelby Collins. Now, Kelby Collins going into year 3. I'm sure many Alabama fans remember him from the high school ranks. There was some really impressive stuff from Kelby Collins as a true freshman at Florida. Going into year 2, Florida didn't really know what they wanted to do with him, right? He played a lot of edge as a freshman, then tried to kick him inside, but he didn't have really the size to play on the inside. And so kind of a wash year 2 of his career with the Florida Gators. I think the conversation with Kelby Collins is, look, we know this guy. He even flashed in the SEC for Florida in 2023. The conversation you got to have with Kelby is, hey, you're either playing on the inside and we're going to commit to putting some weight on you and having you on the inside, or we're going to play you as a heavy-handed edge rusher. But you got to figure it out. I feel like Florida kind of waffled between the two, and then you just got a Kelby Collins that was a tweener and really couldn't get on the field. The physical traits, the capability of Kelby Collins is not my question. If you want to add him to your defensive line, you got to figure out what you want to do with him and then really develop this kid at that position. The defensive line is probably a position that, to me, is one of the bigger concerns. I just didn't feel like, and I think a lot of Alabama fans agree with this, that pass rush wasn't good enough. And we kind of know when Alabama's defense, or whenever you see a really good defense in college football, it starts with that front seven. It specifically starts with stopping the run and getting after the passer. I just don't know if Alabama had that dog that was, third and long, I'm going to win and get us off the football field. Alabama's going to be looking for that in the transfer portal. Another guy that I think would be, and it sounds like he's interested in taking a look at Alabama, Gabriel Brown-Ladindi, going into year 4. Now, the concern with him, kind of similar to Kelby Collins, kind of similar to the conversation we had about LT Overton 12 months ago, was this kid can do it. We all know he can. There's a reason he was a top 10 national prospect coming out of high school in 2022. You just haven't seen it yet. And I think if you're Kalen DeBoer, this Alabama coaching staff, you got to figure out, is year 4 going to be the year it clicks for a guy like Brown-Ladindi? Because if it does click, you're getting potential game wrecker on the defensive line. My concern with him is, look, if it hasn't clicked in the first 3 years, what makes us think it's going to click in year number 4? We've seen it happen, but as they get older, the chances of it clicking kind of fall off. We'll see what it is with this guy. I mean, you look at him and say 6'3", 310, big hands, long arms. He can do it. Now, if you're Kalen DeBoer, say, hey, do we think as a staff we got a spot for him and we can get him to that level? One guy I don't have any connection, or I haven't seen any connection to Alabama, but I'd certainly be taking a look at is AJ Pena from Rhode Island. Look, I'll be the first one to put my hand up. I don't watch a ton of Rhode Island football on my Saturdays. This kid emerged in the transfer portal. The production is incredible from the FCS ranks. 86 tackles, 22.5 tackles for loss, 12.5 sacks. Extremely productive at the FCS ranks. The traits aren't totally there, right? 6'2", doesn't have a ton of length, 243. He's not going to wow you walking into a room. Again, kind of like Luke Haas. It's hard to argue with that kind of production, and we've seen guys have success, right? Obviously, Jared Verse, the biggest name from Albany to Florida State, emerged as one of the best defensive linemen we saw in the country. John Pius at Wisconsin, probably another good example. There have been examples of guys jumping from the FCS level to the highest level of college football and dominating. you got to figure out if AJ Pena is that guy. The production's there. And I think there's a chance you could be kind of finding a diamond in the rough. The biggest difference between I think AJ Pena and a guy like Jared Verse, who's probably what you're if you bring in AJ Pena, that's kind of what you're hoping to get is, hey, did we just find a diamond with Jared, kind of like Jared Verse? He doesn't really have the traits that Jared Verse was kind of a freaky dude that went to Albany because he was a freaky athlete that didn't really have a position, put on a lot of weight, found his home, and then went up to the Power 4 level. I'm not sure if AJ Pena has the high-end traits that Jared Verse does. He's a damn good football player, and you kind of want to get guys that are damn good football players, and that probably is what I'd say about AJ Pena. Look, it appears that Alabama is going to be active, right? They've had a ton of guys either on campus or are going to come on campus over the next couple of days. It's no secret that Alabama is going to get some guys. What positions probably depends on who comes back from this Alabama roster in 2024. As we get more information around that, I'm guessing you're going to see Alabama kind of ramp up the aggression. And again, going back to how we started, I really do trust Kalen DeBoer in his process at evaluating and using the transfer portal. We'll cut it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.